up to episode 11 here in Demo RPG, if you will. And today we're going to be adding potions and then adding an inventory. So let's dive right into it. Alright, so we have an item manager, and it seems to do some things. We're going to make a new... Well, it's for creating things. We're going to have it do a little more than that later, but for now we just want a nice way to control how things are made. That way we don't have to worry about memory leaks and stuff like that. So let's make a new item here. Static item pointer, create potion. So we're going to make a method to create potions. Well, I don't know what hotkey I hit, but it popped up some emoji thing. Who uses emojis when coding? Visual Studio? Is that a joke? Anyway, standard string name. So potion needs a name, of course, and we need to decide what a potion does. It's going to be like a buff, basically. So if we look over at buff that we designed a while back, we see that every buff has a name, duration, the stats it buffs, and whether it's a debuff or not. So we could essentially just pass it a buff and say, hey, this is what it does. But this could also maybe be nothing. Maybe well, we've got a name already. That's interesting. Well, a potion might be called one thing, but the buff it gives might be called another. So it does kind of make sense to have a name here as well as a name in the potion. Now, we obviously haven't designed the potion yet, but we'll get to that. Just kind of hypothesizing a little bit. So it is going to have, rather than core stats, it's going to have a buff pointer. Because we want to compose this. We maybe want to pass null here. So we'll just say a given buff or something like that. Or just buff lowercase. That's fine. Alright, and we also want to know what else could this potion do. It could potentially heal. So we might want that. So let's go ahead and put in here well type heal. Because there's nothing in buff that says it could be a heal right now, but we do want to know about this. So let's go ahead and be sure to include our types here. Include types. Now I was thinking, we're using string all over the place. We might want to type that to something like text name or something. But let's just go with this potion here for now. So what we're going to do basically is, if they pass in null here for this buff, we're going to assume it's not a buff, that it's instead a heal. So there's going to be multiple different types of potions. Maybe some of them give you a buff and a heal. We just kind of got to decide something there. So now we got to do the same thing basically. We want to make a new item. But this time we want to make a new potion rather than an armor or a weapon. So let's copy this down and let's type potion here. And let's just fill this out with what it would be. Oh, pressing the wrong buttons again. Buff and heal. And this will be potion. This should be item. Oops. It doesn't know what potion is yet. And that's intended because we haven't designed that in our item yet. So let's go to our item. And of course we have item delegate. We've got our item here. That's the one we actually use. And then down here we have the whole equipment setup. But now we just want to add a potion to the mix. See what I did there? Alright, so let's go ahead and just do that. Now, what is potion other than an item? So, it's probably going to be fine to, let's think about this here for a second. We probably actually want this item. Let's see, where do we want this item? At some point here, I'm going to split this code up, I think. But let's put item at the very bottom. Alright, that way we just kind of keep things separated. Okay, very good. So let's go class, potion. And now potion is going to be inheriting from the item delegate, of course. It doesn't need a whole lot else here. But it is going to have, of course, a buff pointer. Yeah, we'll just call it. Maybe I should have underscores. I don't know. I don't want to use just the keyword buff too much. Or add the name buff, but it's fine. We'll just go with it. Yeah, we'll just go with it. Alright, and we need to decide well type heal. Does it have a heal or not? And we need some sort of constructor here. So let's go ahead and make this private. And we're going to do the same thing we were doing with these other ones where like this armor, everything's private. All the constructors are private, and it has a friend class of this item manager because literally only the item manager is the only thing that's allowed to instantiate these. And that's just so we can carefully manage how things are done. So let's just go potion and put some data in here. Now we know it needs a name, so let's put that in there, name, and we know that it could potentially have a buff of some sort. So let's go there like that, buff pointer. We'll just call it B here, and or just BUF. We'll leave an F off of there, and we know it could have a heal. HP. We'll just call it HP heal. Sure, that's fine. And I'd rather rename this, I think, like heal amounts or something. Just a little clearer. A little clearer. Thinking. Yeah, there's probably a better name for buff, but we're just going to leave it like that. You know, buff's a little vague. There's a lot of different things that tend to be called buffs or buffers or things like that. All we mean is just like a temporary stat boost, kind of as like a, you know, a standard RPG buff and debuff terminology there. All right, so it still doesn't quite understand what this potion is. So we just need to keep designing it, and we'll keep going with it here. Okay. Yeah, we haven't finished this, so of course it doesn't. So we need to use this item delegate and say, well, go ahead and put the name in there because we got a little constructor there that'll take that. So let's just forward that name, and we need to decide what this buff is. The buff is going to be buff, and if it's null pointer, then it's going to turn into nothing. If it's not null pointer, it'll do a thing. And heal amount, of course, is going to be HP heal. However you want to type that is fine. And then we have nothing else in there. So there we go. We now have a potion. Now there's something else interesting about potions here. And that is, well, what if you have multiple potions that are exactly the same? So that's something we need to think about, because we essentially want to have a quantity possible for this particular item. So what we can do here is just go quantity. Let's see how we're going to do this we might change this later, but for now let's just use an unsigned integer. 16 will be fine. That should be plenty of space. Let's go ahead and take a look at our types. See if we got anything relevant. No, we don't have an item count. So we might want to, let's just make another type def for item count, because we'll use this over and over as we go forward. And we just want to control that a little bit, and we'll call this quantity. So maybe you could find more than one. And we'll assume it makes one at a time, but we could put in here something like quantity, because maybe you find a stack of 3 or something. Quantity. And we're going to need a few other special things. Oh, we need to call this item count. That's the type there. We'll just call it quant, which sounds a little weird, but we'll just assume it's 1. So we'll set it to 1 if they don't specify. And that way, in this constructor, let's go ahead and break this to a new line so we can see what we're doing. And, you know, I always forget to collapse these sides so that you guys can see better. But there we go. So let's go. Quantity is Q, not Q sort. I don't know why I put that in there. Autocorrect or something. Quant, rather. There we go. So now we can pass in a quantity, and if we leave that off, it's just going to default to 1. And now we need to think about something else here. What if we create the same potion over and over? Then what happens? Well, we need some sort of comparison operator to say, hey, is this exactly the same as some other potion? If so, just increase the quantity. And that's something we will address a little later, but for now we're just going to have the ability to create a bunch at once potentially, because I think that makes sense. And there we go. We now have an item potion that can be instantiated as an item, because we can do it as this delegate data just the same. So if we go back to our item manager and we look at potion, it's not happy because it says, hey, potion is not allowed. There's no pure virtual function. So we can't actually instantiate it yet until we override this particular little function. And really this function is not something we're ever going to use. I just explained that last episode, but really we just need something to make this pure virtual. And we could have this something like a do not use or something like that. But, you know, we have ways of casting this and checking whether it's a potion or not already. So we rarely are going to need this get type, which is kind of a cool thing you can do. And we might change that later. But what I think we're going to do for now is, you know, we've retyped this over and over. And if we change it, we're going to have to change it in a lot of spots. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to make a macro of this. So let's go define, and we'll call this macro get type in all caps. And what's it going to be? It's going to be this here. So there we go. And now we have a macro of it. I could make it a little nicer looking, but yeah, let's not worry about that. So instead of typing this here, let's just put the macro, scroll down here, and just find anywhere else where we've put this get type, and just kind of clean up our code a little bit like that. We got it right here. Oh, get type. Okay, clean up a few lines there. And item here doesn't have it. Okay, so yeah, that should take care of it. It wants a hint file, but we're not going to care about that. So now if we ever decide that we're going to change this function, we can just edit this macro and this here rather than everything in the class. Hope that makes sense, but basically just saving us a little future trouble, because this is really just a placeholder to make sure that's pure virtual. And also this potion here, let's just go ahead and make it final, kind of like we were doing with the armor and weapons, just so it's clear that you're not supposed to inherit from them further. And you know, we could do something like potion types and stuff, but that's up to the design of our game. Right now we got a system already that's half decent, where it at least either heals or buffs. And we could even say here that the heal defaults to 1. So if they don't specify anything, like if they just pass in a name and null, it's the tiniest heal potion of 1 and count of 1. So this might not be, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking maybe we should change the order of this a little bit, because I kind of like the idea of putting this buff near the end and defaulting it to null pointer. And that's going to change how our item manager works too. We will have to do it like so. But in reality, we should probably have the defaults on this one as well. So let's just fix this up a little bit. Quantity. Yeah, so we have some options in how we do this, basically. I'm kind of just picking a method and going with it. Quantity. Did I spell that right? No, I didn't. But it also is a item count. I will just call it quant again, or you could call it amount or whatever. But quantities, I feels like a little more clear. Okay, but so if we call create potion, you're forced to pass values in here, and it's gonna, you know, these default values don't actually do much with the way we have it designed. Is a thing, because sure, we have them here, but there's no way to create it unless we actually use the item manager, which doesn't have default values, so it's going to be passing in anything. So we probably want to, if we're doing default values, we'd rather do it here. I'm not sure if this is actually going to be happy. Yeah, seems okay. You just need to make sure they start, whatever has default values is at the end. See, kind of an interesting thing. You try to put a default value in the middle, it's not happy because it's not at the end of the parameter list. So yeah, that's a thing. And IDs will tell you that. If you don't have an ID that tells you that, then you'll find it out eventually. But we could do similar things for the create weapon, the default values. It's really just totally optional, and it depends on your design. So that's what we're going with here. All right, so the potion creates all this stuff, but we need to make sure potion destructs properly. We know that's really important. We've explained that a lot. So we have this buff pointer. That's the thing we need to make sure destroys. If this potion destroys, we want to destroy that as well. However, there's something interesting here that is going to be a little tricky. Okay, so you could have multiple potions, it could have multiple quantities, so we need to kind of specifically control this destructor. Like if we use a potion, we don't want it to destroy this memory unless it's the very last potion. So we need to consider that, but that's going to be something we write later, because in general we're gonna assume. I guess I'm gonna put this get type here so it doesn't do this weird tab over thing. I guess I guess the place to put your macros is right before one of these because it doesn't do this weird tab bug that we talked about. Anyway, so if buff exists, we'll just delete buff and set it to null pointer. Buff equals null pointer, and of course I'm doing this a little wrong. I need to put brackets around it since it's multi-line. There we go. So if the buff exists, we delete it. If we're deleting the last potion. So typically, we'll get to this later, but when we use a potion, we'll check the quantity, and if there's more than one, we reduce the quantity. If it's the last one, we'll use it and then actually destroy the thing. So that should be fine. All right, and I think I might have messed up somewhere else in here. Let's just do a search for star and look at any pointers. We just need to make sure, like here where we're deleting data, we should actually be checking if data exists first. So a little cleanup there. If there is data, then do the whole delete thing. And that way it actually works properly. Now, what people often do is they'll put in their class somewhere, they'll put like a free data function that does this basically. So it's optional how you want to do that. But, for example, they might have privately somewhere here, static void free. And they'll do something like, what would this be? This would be item delegate star data. And they'll do something like this. If data delete, delete. Oh, data. Gotta make sure we keep the functions. Now, this isn't something you have to do. I just want to show you this because you see this in a lot of code bases, this sort of thing. And rather than all this, they'll just go free data, and that way it does the null check and all that stuff in one. But and this static function means it doesn't. You have to pass it data. And this doesn't get created for everyone. So no matter how many items you create, there's only one free function. It's kind of like an extension. So you'll see extensions like this too. Yeah, anyway, that's a whole nother topic. And we're just going to keep it like so. I think it's clean this way where it just deletes itself. It should handle itself. Item manager. Okay, so now we have a way to create potions. Let's go ahead and test out our potions here. We've got helms and all that stuff, and they just equip, but we don't have a way to equip potions or anything like that, but we can at least test creating them, and let's go ahead and do that. So let's make a new block here, and let's just go item. I don't know, we'll call it a heal potion equals item manager create potion. We'll call it minor healing potion, sure. And we need to pass it how much it heals. We'll say it heals for 3. And we could say, oh, does it buff anything? If not, we need to pass. Well, we got defaults here, so that's actually nice. We can just leave these blank. It doesn't buff anything, and its count will be 1. If we want to change the count, maybe buff should be last on this list. I actually like that. Let's make that change real quick. We'll go to the item manager. We'll say this buff actually is going to happen last. That way we can change, just so we can quickly make healing potions if we want. And it actually forwards in a different order. Let's just make that a little more synchronized here by doing it like that. And then we'll go to our potion and fix it here as well. Yeah, where are we at? There we go. There's the buff. Let's just put this at the end. That's all we're doing. That's just a personal preference. I just like the idea of if it doesn't have a buff and you just want to make potions real quick, you can say, hey, make 3 of them like that. There's 3 potions that heal for 3. And very good. And then we can just do a check here. Let's see if it works. So we'll go heal potion, or let's say potion rather. Potion pointer. Wait a sec. How were we doing this earlier? Okay. So here's the thing. We can't do the cast check here because we're not allowed to instantiate potions. Just let's try it. Let's call it pot. equals, and we need the dynamic cast stuff. Dynamic cast it to a potion pointer, and then seal potion. So we're basically, this creates an item. And we want to see, of course, if it possibly can be cast to a potion. And you'll see, it's going to be a little set. The operand of runtime dynamic cast must have a polymorphic class type, which it does. But the thing is, if we go to this potion, its constructor's private, and its friend class is item manager. So only the item manager or someone that's allowed to mess with this is going to be able to do it. The player character can do it, so that's a thing. And maybe later we'll have a world manager and stuff like that. But right now it's just totally not allowed. Oh wait, I'm doing this slightly wrong actually. The heal potion, we actually need its data, right? So we have a get data function, but it's const, so it's not happy. We could go const cast. I forget the exact syntax, but yeah, we explained we don't want to do that. And so you're not allowed to dynamic cast that const, but you could do it like so, dot underscore data, but we don't have access to data. It's private and only the player character and the item manager. So essentially in our main here, we're not allowed to do all this. And the way we were getting around that before is we were passing it to the player character. And the player character is a friend class of item, and it's allowed to mess with the data. So, and the reason we do that is so people can't dupe things, basically. We're controlling the memory and how the items work so that we don't get glitches later in our game. Because if you're just leaving everything wide open, at some point you're gonna, could be way further down in your design, and you're gonna get to a point where you just kind of get things to work, basically. And if you've designed it previously where it's like, okay, you can get it to work, but only if you do it in a way that I allow, then people can't mess it up further down the line. I know that's kind of confusing and maybe awkward to hear as a new programmer, but that's one of the beauties of C++ and this whole being able to control things and putting things in private is basically you don't let yourself mess up down the line when like a week later you come back to work on your project and you may have slightly forgotten exactly what your plans were. If you had previously designed it with the future in mind of, okay, so if someone uses this, they got to do it in a specific way so they can't mess it up. It actually saves you a lot of time because you basically reduce the number of bugs you accidentally introduce as your software grows. So that's the whole point here. And you may love that, you may hate that, but there's a reason it's designed that way, and you should take advantage of it if you can. But that's a lot of that's my opinion, of course, but it is quite relevant, I think. All right, well, we can make potions, but we can't exactly do anything with them. So kind of like how we have equip longsword, maybe we want like use item, and that is going to be a thing. So let's go into our player character class, player character, where we are here. We have an equip, but let's do a use, a bool use. And this is also going to pass in an item, item to use. And it's going to be similar in some ways, but we're going to do the casting checks we need. See, in this we say, is there an item? Does it have data? And then we check if it's armor or weapon. And it equips if it's armor or weapon, or at least tries. And this is going to be similar in the way that, well, we want these two initial checks, basically, just to make sure there's actually something. And it returns false if there's nothing. Oh, call it item to use this time. But rather than checking if it's armor or a weapon this time, you might know where I'm going with this. We just want to check if it's some type of usable item. Currently, the only thing we have is potions. So let's name all this potion. 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 This name actually doesn't matter. It's just a temporary name, but potion's fine. And we see if it casts to a potion. Here we do the null check. If this fails, we return false because, well, let's just put return false. So yeah, we could put the return false earlier, but we assume that if it goes through this without executing, it's going to return false. But if it does execute, then what do we do? Now this is a thing we need to think about here. If it's a heal potion, so let's just check. If potion dot, oh, it's a pointer, heal amount is greater than 0, then let's increase our health. And we have health because this is a whole player character setup. So we just go PC class dot, or let's see, we have a heal. Yeah, we should have a heal function somewhere that we've designed earlier. Let's see if we can find it. HP maybe? I forget exactly. It's been a while. But maybe we have an increase. Do we have an increase function? Is that what we called it? I totally forget. Okay, let's have a look way up top at our player character delegate, because I believe we have it in here. I mean, we do have the HP, of course, and it is actually public, so we can access it and do whatever we want. But we want to make sure it doesn't, go too high and that sort of thing. So we should actually use the functions that do that sort of thing. I thought we did. Yeah, we have an increase current. So we call increase current. Kind of tricky here because technically you're allowed to increase it above its current if you just access it directly. So maybe we need to rethink that a little bit, but just a little heads up there if anyone wants to play around with that on the GitHub, that would be cool. But if not, fair enough. So we need to call this on the HP. So we go PC class, HP, increase current. That's what it was. And it would just be by this heal amount. Like so. That way it doesn't overheal. We have this increased current designed in a way where it can't take you over your max. So that's what we want to use. We'll do a little delegating there. And that's based on this whole point well class. All right, so that should work. And that should heal us if it has a heal. So also another thing we could do, the heal amount's always going to be something. We don't necessarily need to even check. We could just straight up call increase current. And if it doesn't heal for anything, it doesn't heal for anything. But I don't think that's going to cause any problems right now. It just reduces the number of checks we need to do. It'll make it a little more efficient. And we already know. So yeah, we have some pointers here that we're not checking in this function. Like this is a pointer, this is a unique pointer. We should, in theory, be checking if they're null. But because of the way we've designed this earlier, we know for a fact that PC class has to be instantiated. And we know that HP has to be instantiated. So in our current design, we don't really need to check those, although they're being really technical. A lot of static analysis stuff is going to pick this up and be like, hey, you're using these pointers in a function and you haven't checked if they're null. It's gonna kind of complain, but we just know off the design that they can't be null. All right, so then we have that. And we also want to check the buff. Now buff, we know for sure can be null if potion buff, and that'll just be a check. If that is true, then it buffs. And we're just gonna call apply buff of whatever this potion is. Apply buff. And whatever the potion is. Potion buff. Oh, spelled correctly there. And now this wants a non-pointer. So we have to dereference it with this star. That just says get the actual data. Because of the way we designed this apply buff, which forwards to the, okay. Oh my goodness, this is a crazy function. This is something that probably needs redesigned. Now I'm looking at it, there's too many layers that it's confusing. But basically all this does is apply a buff, give it the duration, all that good stuff. So yeah, it applies the buff that whatever your potion does. Let's back up a few times, go back down to where we were. Use item, here it is. And now, if we ended up using this potion, we need to reduce the quantity. So at this point, we would go potion quantity minus. That just reduces it. So now we need to think about another thing. All right, so what if there's 0 now? What if there's 0 potions? I guess we just delete it, right? If potion dot quantity is 0, then we destroy it. But do we really want to do that here in the use, or do we want that to happen in some sort of cleanup phase? That's something I haven't decided yet, but yeah, I guess we would just do it here. Delete potion. So what this is going to do is it's going to free the memory, of course, and it's going to call destructors. This is kind of a scary function to use. I don't actually know if this will work correctly. I don't know if this is going to be something that's going to cause problems because of this dynamic cast. So maybe a little scary there. But in theory, you know, if it is a potion, it'll just, you know, delete this and it'll call this destructor, which will delete the buff if it needs to, and everything else about this potion will just get deleted, and it should be fine. But we also have to think about what's going to happen with our inventory and how is our inventory going to be managing this memory too. But for now, that should be fine. So let's go back to our main. Now we made this potion here and we have data, but the pointer will go out of scope right here. So let's go ahead and leave it in scope by just doing that sort of thing, because we're going to go ahead and use this heal potion and just see what happens. So let's go somewhere in our class here. Now our guy hasn't taken any damage. It's not really going to work to just, sure we could use him, but if we're full, then kind of what's the point basically, right? So maybe we need a case in here, and I'm not going to do this, but just to explain a little logic in avoiding bugs. What if you try to use a heal potion, specifically a heal potion, doesn't even have a buff, but you're already at full HP? What would you want to happen if it was your game? Well, you would want it to say no, basically. It's like, I won't use it. You're already at full. It doesn't have a buff to apply, so that's not relevant. So we could have a case in here, like, let's see. I guess we would do, okay, maybe we do it after this check here. So maybe we do this buff check first and apply the buff and then increase the current. So maybe we could go if, let's see, we already have access to the character, PC, class, HP. Now, we probably want a, like a is full method, is full. So let's just design that. Is full and potion, not buff, or not potion. So if your HP is full and there's no buff, just, well, we want to return false, basically. Return false. So don't use the potion. And, you know, I said we weren't going to do this, but it's easy enough to actually do that. We're just going to do it. If we end up getting all the way to the bottom, we're going to return true, because if we get all the way here, we've actually used the potion. So we have to think about this very, very carefully. Let's go ahead and design this function. Doesn't exist. Let's go to our HP here. Let's go to our point well, and why not? We should have a method that just checks if it's full or not. Current fullness, we have a max, and we just want to see if the current and the max are equal, basically. So public, yeah, let's just do it right here because it's a getter. Full is full, and we'll just return current fullness equal max, which is just going to check if the current and the max are the same, and then if they are, returns true, means we're full. If they're not, it's going to be false, means we're not full. A little simple function. That'll just help. I mean, it makes sense to have that in a point well, I think. There we go. All right, let's go back down here to our use function, and I think we're pretty good here. So now if we walk through this, we can think about it, you know, the obvious null checks here. And, you know, there's more things. Okay, let's walk through this, but I'm going to change this just a little bit, I think, here in a second. Let me just check something here. So, all right, I'll explain in a second. I hope I don't forget to come back to what I'm thinking, but I want to finish walking through this. All right, so we check if it's a potion, and if it is, we try to apply it, basically. If it has a buff, we apply the buff. So this will get skipped if it doesn't have a buff. That's really important for our logic here. All right, and if your HP is full, and it doesn't apply a buff, we return. We get out of here before we reduce the quantity, basically. Otherwise, this gets skipped. If your HP is not full, or if it applies a buff, we're going to continue down this line. So go ahead and heal for whatever heals. Maybe it's a 0, maybe it's not. Doesn't really matter, but we at least need to continue. But this case here is for if you're max health and you try to use a heal potion, basically, right? Let's make this clear. If max health and trying to use a heal potion, don't use it. Yeah. So that's it. I think that's pretty clear. And that's what this will do. Now, we could have this down here, but it doesn't matter really a whole lot because we've already kind of addressed that. So there's some things where order has to be really precise and other things where you got a little bit of play in the order. And this is one of those things where we have a bit of play, so it's actually fine like this. All right. But, you know, really we should have more comments. Apply buff if it has one. Attempt, well, just increase HP by the heal amount. Could be 0, and that's fine. All right. We use the potion, reduce quantity. Now, there's something else interesting here. We could create potions with quantity 0. It's possible. We could do it. If we look at the item manager, we could pass quantity at 0. It would still create it with 0, and it would just not work. It would be weird. So let's just not allow that. All right. If you're making a potion, what exactly is the point of making 0? There wouldn't be. If quantity, let's just say if your quantity is 0, then we make it 1. That's it. And we're just being a little pedantic here. Now, there's other ways to do this. Actually, let's do it with a little ternary operator here. I'm doing this backwards. Here we go. So we'll do it in line here. There we go. Spelling this wrong. Oh, I always forget the order. No, that's fine. It's just, you know, Visual Studio underlining things when it doesn't need to sometimes. Okay, so what this does, in case you don't know about it, it's a ternary operator. It's just an end line if else, basically. It says if the quantity is 0, return 1. Otherwise, return the quantity. So that way they can't make 0 potions. All right. Just in case they try to pass 0 to this item count. At least 1 potion. All right, and that'll get rid of that whole bug case, because yeah, that could be crazy. We could what could end up happening if we don't do that and we keep this function as it is it could do all this stuff, and then when we go to use up the potion, it would already be 0, so the quantity would minus. But what happens when you minus an unsigned integer that's already 0? It wraps to the max value. So they would suddenly have 32 million potions, and this quantity would not be 0, so it wouldn't delete it. They would basically get 32 million potions if we left that bug in there. And the spiffing Brit would just be like, now what we can, he would do his thing, get millions of potions and break our game, and we just don't allow that. That's by this simple bit of logic and a little bit of forethought. Hire me, Bethesda. And there we go. I think we've walked through that. Now, the thing I wanted to come back to, this is all about coding standards. We see it often. Actually, when I reviewed the Bungie coding standards from their article, one of their standards was you only have one place in your function where you return. You don't want to have returns all over the place because it makes the function confusing. So I just want to make an example of how you would do that because it's kind of important to know. Basically, all you do is you have a return value at the top. Return, we want this to be a boolean, of course. This is one way to do it. And we'll just default it to true. And now anytime we do this sort of check, we'll just go return value equals false, if it would be false. And now this kind of convolutes things, in my opinion, because now as you go through the rest of this, you always got to be checking what your return value is, because like once it's false, we don't want to do the rest of this. We just want to skip to the end and return it. So now what you have to do, and this is where it gets painful, is you just always need to check here. We got to knot it. And basically in any of these checks, we need to always be rechecking what the return value would be. So yeah, it's a trade-off. If you're not allowed to return yet, then as you go forward, the rest of the stuff you might do, you always be checking, hey, is the return value already false? Because if so, we need to be skipping to the bottom. So we could do that like so, because this will say, now if we think about it, okay, let's default the return value to true. Let's assume this is going to be successful. First of all, are they passing in a non-null item? If not, return value is false. It's going to fail. And yeah, we're actually done here. So we should, in theory, return here. But as you can see, this is going to just get messy. So I don't really do that ever. I don't prefer that coding standard. I just think it becomes even it's a pick your poison sort of search situation. I'm okay with returning false and getting out of the function, because once you return, you don't go any further, and that's intended. So you just need to consider that in your logic is all. But do what your company requires in general. If you're working for someone else, or with a big team rather, where everyone's trying to follow the same standards. But in some ways I can see how it'd be beneficial to do it that way, but in other ways it's like I'm already so used to doing my logic in this way, where I just return the proper thing if it gets to a case where I should, that I'm going to keep it like that. But yeah, that was all. Okay, there we go. Now we still need to do the inventory. We're out of time for today, so we're not going to. But it's the same case with these items. We are going to, well, once we have an inventory, we're going to update this to pass in a reference to the inventory, because you got to be using your potion from somewhere. So we essentially want to know what inventory are you using it out of, so that we can reduce the quantity in the proper inventory or delete it out of the proper inventory. So we'll keep these to-dos here, and we will get to this inventory hopefully next episode. But that's it for this one, just getting those potions all worked out. Hope that makes sense. Okay, we need to use it. Let's do a quick use. This will be the last thing. So we created a potion. It's just a heal potion. Our poor warrior is not missing any health, so he's fine. Doesn't need to use a potion. But let's just, for sake of example, we'll make this item later. Let's go down to the very bottom. All right, let's just delete some lines here. Let's go down to the very bottom after we've made all our stuff and done all our stuff. And let's take damage. And we can do this by just calling take damage. Let's have him take 4 damage. All right, that should reduce his current. We have this function designed in that way. We can go check it out. We see we got reduce amount. Yada yada, it does its thing. And it makes sure that it can't go below 0. We designed that like in episode 2 or something a long time ago. Don't remember exactly. Back to our main. So he's going to take a little damage. The point of this is he's actually going to be able to use the heal potion. Let's go ahead and create that heal potion. And let's go p1.use heal potion. And now let's just check his health. Alright, so let's just do a standard. Well, we'll do it before and after the use, just to make sure it's actually using. Standard cout, health, before using potion. And also another thing on our to-do list, we got to design proper tests. So we'll probably have a full episode on just making tests for as many things as we can in the allotted time. And I'm sure we won't get to all of them, but it'll at least give you a sample of how to do it. All right, health before using potion, p1 dot, we have a get HP, I forget, get current HP. And we'll put a new line character here. And let's just do this after. And we'll do some stuff like this here. Health before taking damage, spell taking right. Health after taking damage. I guess we don't need this one here because it's going to be the same health after using potion. Okay, so there we go. This should be like his max health or whatever. Hold on, let's do a little copy pasta here. Let's use this function or this little call out because it has the nice little slash, which I like. Yeah, there it is. It's just going to say current / max. That way we can see exactly how much he has. And I'm just going to copy this in all of them. Now, I'm obviously doing a hack job in this main because this main is all temporary. It's the one thing that doesn't matter at all. Okay, so we have a little something complaining. We're probably just missing semicolons. Yep. Okay. Very good. So let's run this. And we just want to look at the very bottom here once all this runs. Oh, we have errors. This is fine. We kind of expected to have something. It's unlikely that we got everything perfect on the first try. I think we don't need this semicolon, right? Oh, we don't need that semicolon there. That's true. However, we got something else it's complaining about. Okay, it doesn't know what this buff is. We haven't included buff. Pretty sure that's all it is. It just has no idea. Okay. Looks like we got a few other new things. The stat block also doesn't know what buff is. Uh-oh, we got maybe a circular include here. So we got to address this rather carefully. We got a vector here. Knows what okay, that's fine. Now this is the mess of header only. You got to really carefully do the order of these. Might be the stat block. I'm pretty sure we're not actually using stat block in this buff. No, we're only using core stats. So that might be it. Just got to be really careful that you're only including the things you are actually using. All right, so let's have a look here. Uh-oh, we'll see that it doesn't work correctly. We'll be sure to fix this before we end the episode. Health before taking damage, 27 to 27. After take damage works fine. Health after using potion. Now we can see that it does not go up. Why not? All right, and now we're going to do a little debugging. So let's go into our player character. Let's go into that use function. And let's just put a breakpoint right here. And let's find out why it doesn't heal. We might be returning wrong here. Because that'll return true if they're false otherwise. So if this returns true, yeah, we're returning false here. So we want to say this should be an and. That's the thing here. All right, maybe you caught that earlier. If so, good job. Because this needs both cases to be true, basically. And in our case, this one was false. And that would flip it to true. All right, well, now it should work. So let's get rid of this breakpoint. Let's just hit play again and see if that was actually it. Yes, that was actually it. Okay, so you got to just carefully think about that logic sometimes. So, all right, so yeah, that looks good. Health before taking damage, full. Takes 4 damage, goes down to 23. Uses a heal potion. We designed our heal potion to heal for 3. It does go up by 3 as intended. Very good. Now, of course, we have more cases to test. Like, what if he's only missing 1 hit point? Make sure it doesn't overheal him, stuff like that. Let's take 1 damage and run the same thing, see if it's any different. And yep, there we go. We see it there. It's not overhealing or anything. Everything's working great. Very cool. All right, and that is this episode of making potions and being able to use those consumables. And hopefully next episode we actually get to design the inventory. That, as of right now, is the plan. And so look forward to that. Happy coding, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.